When a single Ghanaian mother found solace in the companionship of a 97-year-old man, many initially criticized her choice. However, as time progressed, those critics came to regret their harsh initial judgments. In Ghana, as is the case with many African countries, the nation is still considered developing, even amidst its advancements. The country continues to grapple with a plethora of societal and economic setbacks. For a CBR, a single mother striving to make ends meet in this precarious economy without any external financial aid, motherhood proved to be an enormously demanding endeavor. A CBR was not born into wealth, which meant she was not among the few fortunate women who, despite being deserted by their partners, had the support of their families. Therefore, she waited with hope for a long time for her husband, wishing he would come back to his senses and reunite with her. Regrettably, he did not return. Facing these hurdles, Isibia decided to continue with her pregnancy, and after 9 months, she welcomed a lovely child. Nonetheless, her partner still denied any paternal responsibilities. Given the norms of African culture, Isibia found herself in a tough situation within her community, enduring both overt and covert disgrace and often being ostracized. She was raising her child alone until she encountered Agwabwa, who was 83 years old at that time. Isibia was immediately attracted to Agwabwa's benevolent demeanor and his genuine compassion for others, despite the fact that Agwabwa was already married to 2 other women and had several children with them. Isibia was open to forging a friendship with him. Their connection quickly grew stronger, and within months, they evolved from friends to intimate partners. Like any relationship, theirs experienced both highs and lows. In Africa, it is not unusual for a young woman to be married to a man as old as her grandfather, a tradition that has persisted for centuries. Historically, older men were considered more responsible and thus more suitable as husbands, although in the last 200 years, many young women were coerced into such marriages. It is exceptionally rare for a young bride to genuinely love her much older spouse. Thus, when Isibia revealed to the few remaining friends she had that she was truly in love with a man 60 years her senior, they were utterly astounded. Her friends suspected she had been enchanted by Agwabwa, as they could not grasp the concept. At 21, Isibia was remarkably attractive, which only intensified the skepticism surrounding her, despite the initial skepticism and criticism from her peers and community. Isibia found that her relationship with Agwabwa brought her significant strength and stability. As time passed, those who had initially doubted her began to recognize the genuine affection and support that defined their partnership, prompting many to reconsider and regret their initial judgments. Even though she was already a mother, Isibia was confident that her older lover was fully capable of caring for her and her child, which was her ultimate desire in life. One fascinating element of their relationship was Isibia's assertion that her lover, despite his age, was quite stylish and full of energy, particularly in intimate moments. To the surprise of many, he outperformed many younger men in this area, thanks to a local medicine that boosted his virility, resulting in very pleasing outcomes. For Isibia, a thrilling development was that her child now had a direct father figure, even though he was not the biological father. They had met a few months after she had given birth in 2006. At that time, Isibia was living with her aunt in Ajirukram, a village located between Obwesai and Dunwa, having been orphaned and left alone after her previous lover had denied the pregnancy. By chance, her new lover, Agwabwa, owned the cocoa plantation nearby. It wasn't long before their paths crossed. In such scenarios, one might be concerned about Agwabwa's 2 wives being significantly younger. Isibia was likely perceived as a threat and a rival, making conflict among the 3 women inevitable, but the man did his best to maintain peace among his partners. As their relationship developed, Isibia became known in the community as the young woman involved with a man 4 times her age. This kind of news traveled quickly, and wherever she went, she encountered whispers and pointing fingers. While some refrained from outright insults, others addressed her in a demeaning way. Many believed that Agwabwa was merely captivated by Isibia's youth. People often remarked, "You'd have nothing left by the time he's done with you," reflecting the community's skepticism about the longevity and sincerity of their bond. Despite the jeers and taunts, which became more frequent over time, Isibia remained steadfast in her decision to stay with Agwabwa. they lived as man and wife, though they never officially married, a practice quite common in Ghana. Where the term for such arrangements is knocking, this type of arrangement is often favored by younger couples who are waiting for a more suitable time to marry or by those in more casual relationships, as it makes separating easier without the hassle of financial or legal complications. Over the 14 years they lived together, the couple remained unwed, which raised concerns about the future, particularly regarding the rights of Asibia's child, who might have limited or no entitlement to Agwabwa's assets in comparison to his legally recognized offspring. This living arrangement brought to light the challenges and complexities inherent in such relationships. The community was taken aback when Asibia revealed her first pregnancy, as many had assumed that Agwabwa, being significantly older, was no longer capable of leading an active sexual life or fathering more children. Indeed, some speculated that Asibia, a young woman in her 20s, would eventually leave upon realizing that her older partner could not fulfill her youthful needs. The prevalent belief was that she had married an older man solely for financial security and would likely run off with a younger man. When I began to develop feelings for Agwabwa, I was fully aware of the potential for gossip and scrutiny. I braced myself for it. Yet the intensity of the backlash and the harsh accusations were unexpected. Yes, my husband is old enough to be my father, but that does not in any way lessen the genuine love I feel for him. In an interview with The Times, Asibia voiced her satisfaction, highlighting that her husband truly understood her feelings, which was paramount to her. By the time Asibia had her fourth child, the murmurs within the community had escalated to open criticism. The fact that they had 4 children and no marriage led many to believe that Agwabwa was simply taking advantage of Asibia's inexperience. During this time, Asibia might have felt the weight of the community's earlier predictions bearing down on her. Nevertheless, Agwabwa remained resolute, honoring his commitment made 14 years earlier when they first met, to always look after her and her children as if they were his own, expecting nothing in return. Despite not initially planning for children, their arrival was considered a blessing, though it also became a source of worry for many. I found myself constantly reassuring her amidst the local chatter. It didn't bother me, because her love was genuine, and that was all that mattered to her. People will always have something to say. If the situation were different and I were the younger one, I might be subject to the same criticisms as Asibia. Thus, let the chatter continue. After 14 years together and raising 4 children, Asibia was 35 years old, and Agwabwa was almost a century old at 97. Despite not having proposed over the years, the likelihood of him doing so now was unexpectedly high. One morning, Agwabwa brought joyous news to Asibia. They were to be married in just a few days. While the proposal might not have been the most romantic, Asibia was thrilled. At last, their marriage would put an end to the mocking and the skeptical murmurs, proving their detractors wrong. Initially, Asibia was treated with scorn, something they thought would persist indefinitely. She endured numerous insults, but as time went on, those very detractors were poised to regret their harsh words. The wedding photos of Agwabwa and Asibia became an internet phenomenon, catching many off guard. It was only when the tale of their 14-year relationship was revealed that the depth of their bond became apparent. Initially, the same individuals who ridiculed Asibia for marrying an older man were now celebrating at her wedding. Notably, some of these women, who had previously made harsh comments, remained single. It appeared their earlier remarks were driven by jealousy and were nothing more than bitter complaints. Left with no other choice, they had to feign happiness and extend their congratulations to the newlyweds. Do you believe there should be a maximum age difference between partners, or do you think that age is just a number? Next, to give you another story, let's continue to see it. At a chic, bright beachside restaurant, Mark, a young Caucasian server with aspirations far exceeding his current reality, attended to well-off customers regularly. He daydreamed about trading places just to see life from the other side of the counter. His dull daily grind of accommodating the caprices of well-dressed, demanding clientele was beginning to grate on him, until a serene evening when a chance for transformation emerged, embodied by a regal elderly African-American woman, sitting by herself at the bar. She exuded a calm yet commanding presence that instantly drew Mark's attention. While he cleaned the shiny bar surface, he was struck by her grace and the subtle signs of her affluence. The most impressive credit card he had ever seen, which she used to pay her tab. Mark realized there was no ceiling to her spending power. She could purchase whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted, driven by a blend of respect and aspiration. Mark gathered the nerve to ask for her contact information later. In his small apartment, he recognized the significant age difference between them. She could have been his grandmother. Nonetheless, he felt compelled to connect with her, enticed by the prospect of a life brimming with the opulence that had always seemed beyond reach. Their initial outing was an eye-opener for Mark. He was captivated by her fluency in the ways of the elite, as she effortlessly ordered a succession of lavish meals and premium beverages with a simple snap of her fingers. What began as a singular indulgence swiftly turned into a series of opulent meetings. Mark found himself increasingly absorbed in her sphere, relishing meals on immaculate yachts, stays in top-floor hotel suites overlooking twinkling cityscapes, and flying off to lavish weekend getaways. Although he initially pursued her for her wealth, Mark soon became genuinely enchanted by her dynamic spirit. Her presence was electrifying, and their joint ventures were effortlessly funded with a mere casual gesture of her hand, which Mark initially found awkward but soon came to value amidst the grandeur of diamonds and French champagne. She appeared to enjoy his youthful zeal and the wonder in his eyes as they were met with respect by restaurateurs and hotel managers. Yet, Mark was utterly surprised when she proposed marriage. Without hesitation, he agreed, captivated by the thrilling possibilities ahead. Their marriage was a lavish celebration, with her large family from distant places whose names he could barely articulate. Mark met a host of relatives, uncles, aunts, and cousins whose elegant manners he found somewhat daunting. As he mingled with this prosperous familial network, their courteous smiles and reserved demeanors made him feel both out of his element and intrigued. Mark had thought he was cleverly leveraging the situation for his benefit, yet, as he stood there, a newlywed in a realm of venerable wealth and social stature, he came to understand that the future of their unconventional relationship might unfold in ways he had never imagined. Mark experienced a sense of displacement as he offered toasts in languages he didn't comprehend. He was integrating into a culture and community unknown to him, but he welcomed this new phase wholeheartedly. The modest apartment he once inhabited was now exchanged for an elegant penthouse. His transition from bartending in casual attire to wearing tailor-made suits seemed to obliterate his history of long nights spent serving drinks. He had abandoned his former job, which had felt suffocating, for days filled with personal training sessions, shopping excursions, and endless golf games. However, as time progressed, the initial allure began to fade. What began as exhilarating mornings gradually became tedious, vacant afternoons, as friends from his past began to fade away. He realized that his new lifestyle had a substantial, unexpected cost. He had turned into a trophy husband, merely an ornament in Akusa's dazzling presence. Akusa was a puzzle herself. She seamlessly assumed the role of a socialite, captivating investors and clinching deals with a mere word or a gesture. Her laughter permeated their home, yet she often withdrew to her study, leaving Mark feeling isolated. One restless evening, driven by curiosity, Mark discovered an old suitcase concealed beneath their king-sized bed. Inside, it emitted the aroma of old paper and contained photos of sepia-toned faces, possibly Akusa's forebears, dressed in unfamiliar attire. Even more unsettling was an aged property deed with a scrolled signature, ominously marked "Payment for Human Chattel." His heart chilled. Delving further, he found a diary with faded writing, the text in a barely comprehensible language, but words like death, atonement, and generations leapt out at him. The immense fortune of Akusa was possibly tainted. That evening, as he confronted her, she listened with a calm demeanor, hardly surprised, and disclosed a grim family secret linked to the transatlantic slave trade. Suddenly, the past became deeply personal. Akusa discussed the wealth she inherited and her duty to make amends. Mark was stunned. His life, previously defined by simple dreams of desire and ambition, now unfolded a complex array of guilt and involvement. That night, he was restless, haunted by the enigmatic phrases in the diary and the disturbing truths Akusa had shared. With the arrival of daylight, it was tempting to dismiss everything and revert to his privileged role as the pampered spouse. However, from that point, Mark felt out of place, a stranger in a world he was now eager to comprehend. Yet too frightened to explore further, his luxurious existence now felt corrupted. A subtle, gnawing realization was eating away at him. Breakfasts turned into quiet events, delicate pastries and freshly squeezed juices were still enjoyed on the terrace with its city views, but the scenery no longer captivated him. Mark was overwhelmed with a pressing need to reconcile his lavish lifestyle with the unsettling truths he had learnt, and to navigate this newly complex reality. The well-kept lawns, usually a highlight of his weekends, took a back seat today. Akusa had just sprung a sudden change in their schedule. They were heading to Ghana. This revelation nearly made him choke on his croissant. He had imagined future escapes to private islands or a stylish apartment in Paris, but Ghana, to him, it was just a dot on the map, a place he had never considered, shrouded in outdated stereotypes and vague travel warnings. Feeling Mike's reluctance, Akusa placed her cool hand on his, her gaze intense and new. "You'll see my world, Mark," she stated. Not merely suggesting but decisively, the trip to this exotic and unfamiliar destination might turn out to be an adventure, Mike thought, though he had secretly wished for a luxury safari, complete with attendants to handle his designer baggage. The flight to Africa was a stark contrast to the private jets Mike was used to. He found himself pressed against the airplane window, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar surroundings were fleeting and often left Mark grappling with the depth of the narratives being shared. As they arrived, the stifling warmth and moisture immediately wrapped around him, draining his vigor. Gone were the refined limousines he was accustomed to. Instead, they squeezed into a tiny, overcrowded taxi. Akusa quickly delivered directions to the driver in a language Mark couldn't comprehend. Their destination was a far cry from any vacation spot, secluded far off the typical tourist routes. As the taxi jolted away from the urban landscape, a wave of anxiety gripped Mark. Was his relationship with Akusa teetering on the edge, threatened by a history he was unfamiliar with? The village burst into life with vibrant hues and noises. Kids ran after chickens along the dusty roads bordered by colorful market stands, the air filled with the scents of spices, roasted meats, and a profound earthiness that was utterly overwhelming. Akusa's family greeted them with open arms. A stark contrast to Mark's awkward attempts at communication due to the language barrier. Here, Akusa shed her polished business demeanor and embraced her origins with a hearty, uninhibited laugh, completely comfortable in her surroundings while he struggled to adapt. The initial days were a whirlwind of new sensations. They dined on woven mats, the unfamiliar spices igniting a fire in Mark's mouth. The visit to the slave fort was particularly distressing. The somber stone monument stood against the lively coastal backdrop, and as the guide detailed the grim statistics and dates of human atrocities, the air seemed to thicken, as though the spirits of the past still lingered. Standing before him, Akusa's eyes overflowed with the sorrow of her ancestors, her touch now seeming to belong to a different realm. In this setting, Mark's opulent lifestyle and his penchant for luxury appeared grotesquely misplaced. He was living through a history lesson that had never touched him before. In Ghana, the reality of the past infiltrated his being, confronting him each night as the village elders recounted their tales beneath the stars. Beneath the vast expanse of a baobab tree, Mark found himself in an unfamiliar assembly. Invited to partake, he sat on the hard, dusty ground, his pale complexion starkly contrasting with the warm brown tones of those around him. The elders spoke with eloquence, their rich voices weaving through the air, carrying stories and proverbs that mostly escaped Mark. Occasionally, Akusa, his guide, would lean in to offer brief translations, but these were brief and left Mark struggling to grasp the full depth of the discussions. As the conversation progressed, fleeting looks were cast at Mark, their faces conveying emotions that were hard to interpret, possibly amusement, sympathy, or even contempt. In an effort to connect, Mark responded with a smile, which was only met with formal nods and a noticeable sense of unease. He longed for the familiar solace of cold whiskey, the opulent isolation of his penthouse, and the ever-present buzz of rumors that used to fill his days. Now, he was surrounded by the starkness of the natural environment, the buzzing of insects, the scent of burning wood, and the constant feeling of being watched. It seemed as if history permeated the air. Murmuring through the breeze and adhering to the decaying stones of the nearby slave fort, the unreserved laughter around him continuously reminded him of his alienation. On a moving Friday evening, they stood on the ramparts of the ancient slave fort, above where relentless ocean waves crashed against the aged stones below. It was here that countless slaves had once started their daunting voyages across the Atlantic. Facing the harsh reality of the sight, Mark's shallow exterior began to falter. He stood, visibly pale against the backdrop of the old stone walls, struggling to find the words to express his emotions, yet finding himself speechless. Akusa paused, her eyes sweeping across the horizon before focusing on the dungeons beneath, the dark recesses where countless had endured great suffering. "My great-grandmother was sold somewhere like this," she whispered, betrayed by her own kin. Her fate was sealed on a vessel brimming with despair. Mark recoiled slightly. Feeling an unexpected connection with the chilly stone encircling him, had Akusa intentionally exposed him to the painful history that underpinned her wealth? She turned to him, her eyes reflecting a feeling he couldn't quite understand. "Do you think my wealth is merely money, champagne, luxury attire?" she questioned. "It carries a weight far greater. Each coin, each gem is tainted with the blood and tears of those who resembled me." All Mark could offer was a subdued acknowledgement of his naivety. "It's not about your guilt," Akusa stated firmly. "I bear this legacy, this ancient debt. It's my duty to do more than just exist in a lavishly adorned prison." Her gaze was intense, probing, questioning whether he was just another decorative piece she had acquired or if he could comprehend the profound depths of her inheritance. Personal tragedy linked to his own lineage, with each conversation and every shared narrative. His perspective shifted profoundly. That evening, under a vast canopy of stars, Akusa had not merely shared a vision, but had laid out a detailed strategy for systemic change, a mission far beyond mere charitable contributions. She was poised to set up a foundation that would go beyond providing scholarships, which she viewed as merely a band-aid solution, to building lasting infrastructure. Her plan included empowering businesses and forging opportunities for the descendants of the enslaved. Both locally and globally, the enormity and boldness of the undertaking took Mark's breath away. The calm determination with which Akusa intended to use their shared inheritance to effect genuine change rocked the very core of his previously unchallenged existence. When he inquired about his role in her plan, a hint of disappointment flickered across her face. "This isn't about charity, Mark," she clarified. "I don't need you to play the hero. But if there's any decency underneath those designer labels, you'll join me because this history is yours too, whether you accept it or not." As Mark's initial shock dissipated, a profound sense of shame engulfed him. His privilege, once invisible to him, now stood glaringly apparent. Seeing Akusa not just as a mysterious figure but as a woman propelled by a purpose stronger than any material wealth, he felt a new resolve. Sweating under the hot sun, he labored alongside others to clear a site for a new school. The physical toil brought blisters and sore muscles, but also a quiet sense of achievement as his hands, more accustomed to holding luxury, began building something genuinely worthwhile. He listened as elders recounted not the sanitized versions found in textbooks, but raw, personal stories of families torn apart, cultures obliterated, and a persistent injustice passed down through generations. Sitting among children whose eyes sparkled with the promise of Akusa's initiatives, he began to grasp the magnitude of the historical debt and his own responsibility to address it. Speaking with young men haunted by the scarcity of prospects, whose forebears' aspirations had been crushed long before they were even conceived, and observing the resilient women who bore defiance shaped by centuries of hardship, Mark came to a stark realization. He had previously viewed poverty as an abstract issue, not a personal crisis intertwined with his own heritage. This newfound understanding marked a pivotal transformation in his worldview. Marked by a shared commitment to the community's progress, what had once been casual conversations now turned into planning sessions, filled with purpose and urgency. Akusa's quiet strength continued to inspire Mark, and together, they tackled the complexities of building a future not just for themselves, but for the entire village. The systematic consequence of his past, from which he now profited, hadn't emerged from a sudden revelation but rather from a gradual unveiling that exposed the grim foundation of his once comfortable life. as his time to leave Ghana approached, the nagging question that had plagued Mark since his arrival grew overwhelmingly loud. Did he belong to this world? Could he bridge the deep-seated divide that seemed rooted not only in his history but also in the core of his identity as a white man in this place? One evening, as the sun vanished beneath the horizon, Akusa found him in the partially constructed schoolhouse. Her calloused hands laid gently on the rough timbers. Without speaking, her presence silently urged him to continue working toward a shared future. Initially, she sat quietly beside him, then spoke with measured calm. "There's no shame in choosing to leave. If that's your decision, I'll make sure you get a generous settlement. A comfortable life awaits your choice, Mark." His stomach nodded as he pondered her words. The temptation to revert to his old, comfortable existence, erasing all traces of the challenges he now faced, was almost overwhelming. However, looking into Akusa's eyes, he saw a hint of vulnerability beneath her outward strength. They had both shared and exposed their deepest wounds to each other in this unlikely setting. To leave now would be a betrayal, not just to the villagers but to her as well. The hopeful faces of the children he had unwittingly inspired, along with the elders, who bore their burdens and wisdom with weariness, flashed through his mind. Even the crumbling remnants of the old slave forge seemed to pose a question to him. Was his trip merely a visit to history, or was it an opportunity to actively participate and help amend it? "I'm staying," he stated firmly, his voice filled with resolve. A smile flickered across Akusa's face, then blossomed into a radiant expression. Mark harbored no illusions. He knew this path was fraught with potential mistakes and failures yet to come, but he also knew that from this moment on, his life would be irrevocably altered. Their relationship developed into a new, unique rhythm. Gone were the fleeting moments of casual intimacy. Now, their days were filled with shared responsibilities and a united vision for the future. Collaborative efforts dominated as extensive discussions on funding strategies and rigorous analysis of spreadsheets took place. Mark, who had previously dedicated his years to winning over investors, now focused his energies on obtaining vital grants and donations for Akusa's initiatives. Unlike the corporate settings he was accustomed to, he came to understand the essence of hard work, enduring sore muscles, and the subtle joy of watching a child read for the first time in a school he had helped build. Mark also encountered the bitter flavor of frustration due to bureaucratic obstacles, cultural misunderstandings, and even his own unintentional but clumsy errors that occasionally led to setbacks. Although the villagers were welcoming, he could sense their reservations. He recognized the need to prove his worth among them and to show that his intentions were not to turn Akusa into a mere showpiece, but to contribute to something profoundly meaningful. It became clear to him that this was his ultimate challenge: to manifest his ability for altruistic work to support Akusa as she assumed leadership. While he worked diligently behind the scenes, the change occurred slowly but was consistent. What began as months soon turned into years, and his initially faltering Ghana phrases gradually became cautious dialogues with the elders. He learned as much from the children as they learned from him. Clinics were equipped, market stalls overflowed with fresh produce, and generations flourished in the newly electrified schoolhouse. Throughout this journey, Mark's connection with Akusa grew stronger. They were no longer adversaries but allies in the same cause, working together. In a heartfelt conversation one evening, he expressed his thoughts, and a knowing smile was all the affirmation he needed. Our narrative of Mark and Akusa closes not with grandiosity but with the dignified opening of a new school, a project to which Mark devoted himself wholeheartedly. Piece by piece, standing next to Akusa, he was more than just a husband bound by duty. He was a true partner in every sense of the word. Their exchanged looks conveyed warmth and profound respect, a connection not built on fleeting glamour but on a foundation much more lasting than any gem could provide. Their love story was forged not in the luxuries of wealth but from the very earth of a slave fort, the dirt of a village, and the messy, challenging task of collectively forging a better future. What a touching end to their saga. Do you know of anyone who has left behind a life driven by materialism to make a significant impact on the welfare of humanity? Please share your stories in the comments. We would love to hear from you. Next, there is another story. Let's continue to see it. As Bridget's time to give birth approached, her husband Chris was faced with a heart-wrenching possibility. The doctors warned him that Bridget might not survive the birthing process. In a profound moment of sorrow and appreciation, Chris took a photo of her to honor her bravery and the sacrifice she was making. But merely a minute later, an incredible and unexpected miracle unfolded. Throughout Bridget's pregnancy with twins, she experienced sensations similar to those in her previous pregnancies. She was already a mother to 3 children and remembered well the feelings and symptoms from her earlier experiences. Although she noticed a slight increase in fatigue and a more pronounced baby bump that made her favorite jeans feel snug, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. For this reason, she had confidently declined her doctor's suggestion to schedule a C-section, yearning instead to experience spontaneous labor and natural childbirth. However, when her water finally broke, she was rushed to the hospital by Chris. The situation took a drastic and unforeseen turn. The medical terminology used by the doctors was unfamiliar to Bridget, and the intense pain she felt was unlike anything she had endured before. Bridget had given birth to 3 children naturally without epidurals, yet this pain was incomparable, far more severe than anything she had previously experienced. As the situation escalated, the hospital staff ceased encouraging her to push, and the conversations shifted to Chris. Suddenly, a medical team rushed in with unfamiliar equipment. Bridget experienced a terrifying and abnormal pressure. Her surroundings became a blur of frantic activity. Amidst this chaos, the doctor urgently informed Chris that they were losing Bridget and he might want to say his goodbyes. Facing the possibility of losing Bridget, the love of his life and the mother of his children, Chris was overwhelmed. Although he needed to express his gratitude for her immense sacrifice and reassure her of the enduring memories she would leave behind for their twins, the gravity of the moment paralyzed him. Instead of speaking words he couldn't find, Chris took a different approach. He took out his phone and captured a photo of Bridget in her most vulnerable yet valorous state. He knew she might not appreciate the image, disheveled, covered in sweat, tears, and blood, but to him, she had never appeared more beautiful or heroic. This photograph was not just a capture of a moment but a testament to their life, love, and the sudden miracles that can arise even in the gravest circumstances. In a sterile, brightly lit operating room, Chris stood, his life forever altered. As he bore witness to the birth of his twins, this moment, profound and delicate, was marked by both joy and grave concern as his wife Bridget risked her life for their newborns. Amid the chaos, Chris found himself clutching a photograph he had just snapped, a last attempt to capture the transient beauty of the moment. The photograph, taken under the dappled sunlight streaming through the hospital windows, unintentionally captured more than just Bridget's disheveled brown hair. Above her head, a circle of light, possibly a camera glitch or a trick of the lens, formed what appeared to be a halo, an uncanny symbol that imbued Chris with an unexpected sense of peace. Though not typically superstitious, in this moment of raw vulnerability, the image offered him a desperate hope. As the doctors worked swiftly, opening Bridget's belly to bring their children into the world, Chris was consumed with the image. The twins, remarkably distinct from one another, were brought into the world. But Chris scarcely noticed the flurry of medical activity as they were delivered and Bridget was hurriedly stitched up. Just then, a doctor approached with a shock in her expression but words that broke the suffocating tension. "Your wife is suddenly doing better. Her condition remains critical, but there's been a slight improvement." These words, contrasting the desperation, ignited a fragile relief in Chris. The term "better" wasn't a promise, yet it acted as a thin lifeline to which he clung with all his might. The photograph, with its inexplicable halo, now seemed like a beacon in the tempest, a sign that his fight for Bridget was not over yet. As Bridget slowly regained consciousness, her awareness returned piecemeal. First the antiseptic smell, then the rhythmic beeping of the machines, followed by a pervasive dull ache. When her eyes flickered open, she tried to speak but managed only a weak croak. Her memories were fragmented, a jumble of terrifying chaos interspersed with moments of excruciating pain, and faces she barely recognized. She recalled the dire diagnosis of amniotic fluid embolism, AFE, a rare but serious condition where amniotic fluid enters the bloodstream, causing severe reactions. During her recovery, Bridget experienced moments that seemed almost fantastical. Dreams or visions where shadowy figures beckoned and the voices of her children echoed in an empty void, but the days progressed. And reality became clearer. The twins' touch, their presence, served as a constant anchor, tethering her to the world, even as her mind occasionally threatened to drift away. A nurse, with quiet sympathy, explained the ordeal once more. This time, Bridget understood the words clearly: amniotic fluid embolism. Armed with this knowledge and surrounded by her family, she faced the long road of recovery ahead. Strengthened by the incredible ordeal she had endured and the new lives that had joined hers. Bridget had endured a critical situation during childbirth that nearly led to a catastrophic cardiovascular collapse. It was during an emergency C-section that the medical team's swift actions saved both her life and that of her newborn twins. By the time Bridget was able to cradle her babies in her arms, 2 days had elapsed since their arrival. The twins were strikingly distinct, not only because one was a girl and the other a boy, but also because they exhibited opposite skin tones. One twin was white and the other black, a rarity even for children of mixed-race couples. Typically, such children possess a blend of their parents' complexions, much like Chris and Bridget's first 3 children did. However, these twins each strongly resembled one parent in skin color, with the boy inheriting his father's darker complexion and the girl her mother's lighter skin. Recovering in the hospital, Bridget was eager to begin this new chapter with her miracle twins. Though her physical recovery was painfully slow, at times, just sitting up left her breathless, her once strong body now seemed to betray her. Despite the struggle, moments of profound gratitude for her survival permeated her thoughts, amplified by the love that enveloped her. The lingering hospital smells were a haunting reminder of her brush with death. Meanwhile, Chris seemed changed. He was quieter, and his somberness clouded his usually bright eyes, although he attempted to offer reassurance. A noticeable distance had formed between them, shadowing their joy. This emotional chasm appeared to stem from the near-death experience that had affected them both differently. The gap between them widened when Bridget discovered a photograph on Chris's phone. It was taken during the crisis of her delivery, and its haunting image made her breath catch. It showed her in such a fragile state that she questioned if it signified her soul had already departed. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, she brought up the image to Chris, pondering if this was the cause of his persistent gloom. When he responded, "I realized in that moment that an angel was watching over you, ensuring your safety and return to me, and indeed, you did come back." He had never experienced a fear as intense and consuming as the one he felt when the doctors told him to prepare for the worst and say goodbye. Despite his usual skepticism and lack of belief in superstitions, he couldn't dismiss the sight of the halo that seemed to hover over his wife's hair. It wasn't merely a coincidence. He was convinced that it was a divine sign. Someone up there was making sure that Bridget would pull through, and for that, he would be eternally thankful for this miraculous gift. Have you ever experienced a premonition or had a gut feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong or incredibly right? Share your experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories. For now, though, we're signing off. Please subscribe and give a thumb up. See you next time.